She stood near the doorway for a moment, holding her hands together, taking in the sound of the room. It was loud, full of voices, laughter, and restless movement. Chairs scraped against the floor. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed too loudly, the kind of laugh that carried without care. This was not a quiet place, and it was not a kind one either. It felt like a space where people came to be impressed, not to listen deeply. She had been told to sit and wait until her turn. So she did. She chose a chair close to the wall, away from the center, away from attention. She had learned long ago that staying unnoticed was easier. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, not from weakness, but from habit. When you grow up being overlooked, your body learns how to shrink without being told. Around her, people talked freely. Some spoke about talent, others about who they hoped would perform well. A few glanced at her and looked away quickly, as if she did not belong to the same story. One person whispered something to another, and both smiled. She heard it, even though it was not meant for her. She always heard those things. She looked down at her hands. They were steady. They always were. That was something she trusted. No matter how loud the world became, her hands never betrayed her. They had carried her through long evenings, through empty rooms, through moments when music was the only thing that made sense. Those hands had learned patience before they learned confidence. The piano sat at the front of the room, polished and clean, catching the light. It looked important, like it had a role to play in someone else's story. She did not stare at it too long. Wanting to openly had once made her feel foolish. Instead, she waited quietly, listening to the noise around her slowly blend into something distant. When her turn was announced, it did not come with excitement. It was said plainly, almost rushed, as if the speaker wanted to move on quickly. A few heads turned. A few eyebrows lifted. That same soft laughter passed through the room again. Not loud enough to stop everything, but loud enough to be felt. She stood up. For a moment, her legs felt heavy, but she took a step forward anyway. Then another. She walked slowly, not because she was afraid, but because she had learned that rushing only gave people something else to judge. Every step felt exposed. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. As she reached the piano, she felt the weight of expectation, or maybe the lack of it. That was worse sometimes. When people expect nothing from you, they stop listening before you begin. She pulled the bench back slightly and sat down. The seat was cold. The room felt warmer than before, but not in a comforting way. She placed her hands on her lap and took a breath. Not a deep one. Just enough. She did not look at the audience. She did not need to. She already knew what they saw. Someone who did not look like a performer. Someone who did not look confident. Someone easy to laugh at. Her fingers moved slowly toward the keys, but before touching them, she paused. That pause was not hesitation. It was memory. In that short moment, she was no longer in the room. She was back in a small space with weak lighting, where the walls held more silence than sound. She remembered practicing late at night because daytime was too busy with expectations that had nothing to do with her dreams. She remembered being told that music was a hobby, not a future. She remembered smiling and nodding, because explaining herself had never helped. She remembered the first time she realized that music understood her better than people did. How a simple melody could hold feelings she could never say out loud. How mistakes did not laugh at her. They simply waited to be corrected. Those memories did not make her sad. They grounded her. They reminded her why she was there, not for the room, not for approval, but because playing was something she could not stop doing. Even if she tried, a sound came from the audience. Someone clearing their throat impatiently. The moment ended. She opened her eyes and placed her fingers on the keys. The first note was soft. So soft that some people did not even notice it. A few were still shifting in their seats, still distracted. But she noticed it. She always did. That first note mattered. It was like opening a door carefully, not knowing who would walk through. The next few notes followed gently, like a question being asked rather than a statement being made. Some people frowned slightly, unsure of what they were hearing. It was not loud. It was not fast. It did not try to impress. That confused them? Someone near the back leaned forward without realizing it. Another stopped whispering mid-sentence. The laughter was gone now, replaced by something quieter, though not yet respectful. More like curiosity. She kept playing, her body slowly changing as the music flowed. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing matched the rhythm. The room began to feel smaller, not because people moved, but because her focus narrowed. The piano was no longer an object. It was a bridge. She did not rush the melody. She let it unfold the way it had been shaped over time. Every pause meant something. Every soft rise carried intention. This was not a piece chosen to show off skill. It was chosen because it felt honest. Some listeners shifted again, but this time with interest. They looked at her hands, then at her face. There was no smile, no dramatic expression, just concentration. That confused them even more. They expected nerves or pride. They saw neither. Her fingers moved with confidence that did not need to announce itself. Years of quiet effort lived in those movements. Effort that had never been praised, never posted, never applauded. Just done. The room was quieter now. Not silent, but changed. The air felt heavier, like people were holding something without knowing what it was. A few faces softened. Someone's crossed arms slowly dropped to their sides. She felt it too. Not the approval, but the shift. The moment when the outside world begins to fade, and the inside one becomes stronger. That was where she always felt safest. She did not think about what came next. She did not think about whether they would like it. She stayed in the present, letting the music speak in the way words never had for her. The piano responded to her touch, filling the space with a sound that now demanded attention without asking for it. People were listening now, truly listening, even if they did not yet understand why, and as the melody continued to grow, something important had already changed. The laughter that once filled the room had nowhere left to exist. The second part of her performance began quietly. Almost like a whisper, but there was something in it that demanded attention. The first few notes had caught the audience off guard, making them pause, forcing them to listen. Now, the music grew more deliberate, more confident. As if she was speaking not to the room, but to herself, and the room could not help but hear. She let her fingers flow across the keys, gentle yet precise. Each note had weight, as if carrying a story she had lived 1,000 times. People shifted in their seats, some leaning forward instinctively. The air had changed from awkward and loud to tense and expectant. The room no longer had the energy of laughter or chatter. It had become still, waiting. Her eyes were focused on the keys, but her mind wandered through memories that gave depth to every note. Every rise and fall in the melody mirrored experiences that had shaped her without recognition. Those who had doubted her, laughed at her, or ignored her were now drawn in, unable to look away. The music had layers that unfolded slowly. A subtle rhythm emerged, rising and falling like breathing, like the natural flow of life. She did not rush, and that patience created a kind of suspense the audience could feel but not name. Each chord, each careful movement of her hands revealed discipline built over years. Years spent in empty rooms, hands pressing keys in dim light. The sound of her own, its determination stronger than any applause she had ever known. Some of the listeners began to nod almost imperceptibly, as though acknowledging the skill they had dismissed before. Others were frozen, unsure if what they were hearing could truly be real. How could someone so quiet, so small, create such a sound? The melody grew more intricate. A slow, twisting harmony layered over a steady rhythm, filling the space and expanding it. The piano was no longer an instrument. It was a voice, a storyteller, a mirror to the heart of the person sitting at it. Her posture shifted slightly. Her shoulders relaxed, though not completely. She was comfortable in the music now. The room was not just an audience. It was a partner in her story. She felt the silence of the room, felt the way it carried her notes, how it absorbed the emotion she poured into each one. This was what she had always hoped for, though she never imagined it would happen here. In a room that had first laughed at her, the melody changed again, taking a softer, more delicate turn. There were pauses that were intentional, breaths within the music that gave listeners time to feel. A few people blinked rapidly as though trying to hold on to something they did not yet understand. The sound was becoming personal, reaching out to them even if they did not know how to respond. One person tucked a hand under their chin, leaning forward with a new respect in their eyes. Another, who had been smirking, now looked unsure, captivated against their will. Her fingers danced lightly on the higher notes, creating a sense of hope, of longing. It was subtle, but unmistakable. She did not need to draw attention to herself. The music spoke. The rhythm pulsed with life, soft but undeniable, telling of struggles and victories, of laughter turned into perseverance. The audience was learning a truth they had not expected, that the quiet ones, the overlooked, could carry worlds inside them. She glanced at the edge of the piano for a moment. Catching the reflection of a face in the polished wood, someone had stopped talking entirely. Their eyes were fixed on her hands, watching the precision, the emotion, the story unfolding in real time. She smiled faintly, not because she wanted to be admired, but because she felt understood. Finally, someone, even indirectly, was meeting her where she had always been. The piece began to swell, growing richer, stronger, yet still maintaining an elegance that required patience. She played with intention, each hand moving in harmony, building layers upon layers of sound that the audience could feel physically. The lower notes grounded the room, deep and resonant, while the higher notes lifted hearts and minds alike. It was a balance that spoke of experience, not mere talent, a depth few could reach without years of discipline. Some people closed their eyes, perhaps trying to hold on to the feeling without distraction. Others, still skeptical, watched every movement, trying to figure out how it was possible. But there was no trick, no secret beyond dedication. She had spent countless hours learning to listen not just to the piano, but to herself, and now she was sharing that inner music. Every pause, every soft note, every rising chord carried meaning that no words could capture. Her breathing matched the rhythm, calm and steady, creating a sense of intimacy with the music. The room felt smaller, warmer, more connected. Even those who had been talking just moments ago were quiet, drawn into a world they had not anticipated. She did not notice the eyes on her. She was immersed entirely in what she was creating. The music was her language, and now, finally, someone was listening. A subtle shift occurred in the tone. The melody began to explore contrasts, gentle softness followed by bold emphasis. She allowed herself to be expressive, but never showy. The beauty lay in the honesty, the careful shaping of sound. Each note had a place, each chord a purpose. It was not just playing. It was storytelling without words. The room was compelled to follow every twist and turn. People started to respond without realizing it. Some nodded, some held their breath, some leaned forward instinctively. A few exchanged glances, surprised at the skill they had dismissed. The laughter that had marked the beginning of her time in the room seemed distant now, almost like it had belonged to another life. They had expected a performance of noise or showmanship, but what they received was something far more profound. She did not look up. She did not need validation. The music was its own reward. Yet she could feel the presence of others, the subtle shifts in attention, the changing atmosphere. The room itself seemed to recognize that something important was happening. It was no longer about judging or mocking. It was about feeling, understanding, connecting to a story that had waited too long to be told. The melody continued to develop, introducing small, unexpected flourishes that surprised even her. She smiled faintly at the subtle beauty she created, not for recognition, but because it felt right. She allowed herself to take risks within the music, knowing that the room was listening more deeply now, ready to be carried along the path she had prepared. A few people sat completely still, letting the notes wash over them. The sound filled corners of the room that had previously been empty of attention. It brought warmth, reflection, and even a sense of quiet awe. Some felt emotions they had not expected, feeling a stirring that was unfamiliar but welcome. The music had created a space for honesty and feeling, unspoken but undeniable. She shifted slightly, letting her hands glide over new keys, the sounds growing more complex. There was no rush, no desire to impress. The control was absolute, yet effortless. The audience began to sense the layers of thought behind each movement, the planning and the feeling intertwined. This was not a performance of skill alone. It was a performance of heart and mind together, inseparable, resonating deeply. People were leaning in now, unable to resist the pull of the music. The melody was no longer just notes. It was emotion made audible. She had taken something intangible, something deeply personal, and made it available to anyone willing to hear. The connection was silent but powerful, and it spread slowly through the room, quieting murmurs, softening expressions, and opening eyes to the truth of dedication and talent. She allowed herself a small glance upward, seeing the faces before her. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. Eyes were wider, jaws slightly dropped, attention unwavering. The laughter and whispering of before had vanished entirely. She did not need to say a word. The music had spoken for her. It told of patience, of hidden brilliance, of quiet perseverance that refused to be ignored. Her fingers continued to flow over the keys, with confidence rooted not in defiance but in certainty. She had come here not to prove a point, but to do what she had always done, play the music as it lived inside her. Yet, without intention, the room had begun to recognize her as more than they expected. They were listening now, captivated, compelled to witness the unfolding of something rare. The melody shifted again, introducing a gentle complexity, small, unexpected turns that revealed skill, but also personality. Each choice and timing, each touch of the keys reflected her experience, her understanding, and her unique voice. People leaned in more, some with open mouths, some closing eyes, all absorbed in the unfolding narrative. The room had changed. It was no longer a space of judgment, but a space of quiet engagement. The music's rhythm varied, ebbing and flowing with emotion. She let herself feel the piece fully, allowing subtle swells and drops that carried meaning. The room mirrored the rise and fall without realizing it, held by the invisible waves of sound she created. Listeners were beginning to feel something they had not anticipated: genuine admiration, respect, and even awe for the quiet determination that had brought her here. As the piece continued, small smiles appeared on a few faces, hesitant but genuine. People whispered softly to themselves, marveling at the skill they had underestimated. Others sat frozen, eyes wide, realizing too late that they had judged without knowing. The laughter of the past seemed almost like a memory, distant and irrelevant compared to the power of what was now happening. Her hands never faltered. The flow of the music was continuous, seamless, alive. She moved between soft passages and bolder phrases with ease, creating a journey that was more felt than heard. The audience could sense the care, the intention, and the depth behind every note. She did not need to look at anyone to know they were paying attention. It was in the shift of the room itself, the silence that had replaced chatter. She allowed herself one final flourish for this part of the performance, a gentle cascade of notes that lingered in the air. It was subtle, almost delicate, but powerful in the effect it had. The sound resonated beyond the path. A moment had changed her, even though she did not realize it at first. The room had shifted from noise to stillness, from doubt to curiosity. And that change gave her confidence she did not know she needed. She continued to play, her hands moving with a rhythm that was both delicate and firm, as if she were telling a story that had waited years to be heard. Every note was intentional, and the melody now held depth and complexity that captured attention completely. The audience could no longer see her as quiet or timid. They began to see someone who understood the piano as if it were an extension of herself. The music began to take on a new shape, introducing intricate patterns that demanded concentration. Her fingers moved with skill that appeared effortless, yet it was clear this was the result of endless hours of practice. Some listeners leaned forward, trying to catch every subtle nuance. A few closed their eyes, letting the music fill their senses completely, feeling emotions they did not expect to experience. They were not listening to a performance. They were witnessing a journey. As the melody grew, it began to explore contrasts. Soft, gentle passages were followed by bold, commanding chords. The room responded unconsciously to these shifts. People were drawn into the narrative, experiencing tension, release, hope, and longing, all without words. The piano became a storyteller, and she was its voice. Every note she played revealed a part of her inner world, a place where emotions were complex, raw, and real. Some audience members began to exchange glances. The surprise on their faces was unmistakable. They had underestimated her completely, expecting something small, perhaps awkward. But now, the power of her music left them speechless. The laughter that had greeted her earlier seemed almost impossible to recall. How could they have doubted her? How could they have missed the dedication, the talent, the feeling that now filled every corner of the room? She did not play for recognition, yet she could feel the effect she was having. The music had grown stronger, more expressive. She allowed herself to feel it fully, letting the emotions guide her hands. The melody had become a conversation, not just with herself, but with the room, with every person present. She could sense the tension, the surprise, and the admiration building quietly among the listeners. They were beginning to understand her, even if they could not explain why. A subtle smile touched her lips, barely noticeable, but it reflected a quiet joy. She was finally free to express herself without judgment. Her music carried honesty, sincerity, and vulnerability. The room responded instinctively. People unconsciously mirrored the flow of the music. Some leaned in, some relaxed, and some closed their eyes, letting the sound take over their thoughts. The atmosphere was almost magical, an invisible thread connecting performer and audience. The piece now demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. She shifted effortlessly between fast, intricate passages and slow, deliberate movements. Each transition was seamless, a reflection of years of careful practice and deep understanding of music. Her hands seemed to move independently yet harmoniously, a perfect balance of strength and sensitivity. The room was captivated, hanging on every note, every pause. Every subtle variation. There were moments when the music became intensely personal, as if revealing parts of her soul that had been hidden from the world. Some in the audience felt it deeply, unable to explain why tears threatened or emotions welled up. It was more than a performance. It was a revelation. The subtle story of perseverance, patience, and quiet brilliance unfolded in a language that needed no words. She played with awareness, feeling the impact her music had on the listeners. It was no longer just a room of strangers. It was a shared experience. She allowed herself to explore dynamics and tempo changes, moving through moments of tension and release. Each chord carried meaning, each sequence told a story. The audience could sense it. Some leaning forward, some holding their breath. Others closing their eyes and letting the melody speak to their hearts. The piano seemed to respond to her emotions, echoing her thoughts with clarity and precision. Every note was deliberate, yet alive, vibrant with feeling. The audience was now fully engaged, unable to divert attention even for a second. They were discovering not only her skill, but her essence, the human behind the music. It was impossible to ignore her now. Her talent had transformed the room completely. She allowed the music to flow freely, exploring subtle nuances and intricate layers. There was a rhythm that seemed to breathe with her, rising and falling in harmony with her emotions. The room felt smaller, closer, intimate, despite the presence of many people. The audience could feel her energy, her dedication, and the beauty of her expression. They were drawn into a story told entirely through sound, one that left a mark on everyone listening. Some people began to whisper softly, but not out of mockery. They exchanged astonished looks, marveling at her control, her expression, her ability to make music speak so clearly. She had taken what had begun as laughter and disbelief and turned it into something they could not deny. Undeniable genius. The energy of the room shifted completely. She was no longer just a girl at the piano. She was a storyteller, a master of her craft, and a force to be reckoned with. Her hands moved with both confidence and grace, expressing feelings that words could not capture. The melody now carried a sense of triumph, subtle but undeniable. The quiet perseverance of her life, The long hours of practice, the patience, and the resilience, everything she had endured resonated through her music. The audience could feel it, and some of them were deeply moved. Recognizing the depth of experience that had brought her to this moment, the piece evolved naturally, flowing through highs and lows, moments of intensity and reflection. She allowed herself to explore every emotional corner, letting the music guide her. The audience remained rapt, every note a revelation. They were no longer simply hearing music. They were experiencing a life story. The essence of a person who had been underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked. Now commanding attention and respect, she introduced subtle flourishes that added richness to the melody. Intricate sequences that demanded focus. The room was silent except for the piano, and even the air seemed to listen. She had become a conduit for something greater than herself, something universal and timeless. The audience sensed the rarity of the moment, the authenticity of the performance. They were witnessing a transformation, a display of talent that could not be ignored. Her breathing became part of the rhythm, calm and steady, enhancing the flow of the music. The audience felt it too, a shared sense of presence and awareness. Some leaned forward, some closed their eyes, all captivated. The laughter of before was gone entirely, replaced by a quiet awe and admiration. The shift was remarkable. In a short time, the room had transformed from a place of casual observation into a sanctuary of attention and emotion. She played with subtle variations, emphasizing emotion over speed, depth over flash. The music carried stories of struggle, patience, quiet determination, and hidden brilliance. The audience could sense it instinctively. They were moved not just by technical skill, but by the honesty of expression. The piano had become an extension of her soul, revealing more with every chord. Every delicate touch of the keys, the melody now demanded full concentration both for her and for those listening. She allowed herself to explore emotion without restraint, guiding her audience through moments of hope, longing, tension, and gentle release. People were transfixed. Some sat frozen, some leaned forward, and some closed their eyes to absorb it all. Every movement, every note, every pause told a story of resilience, courage, and genius hidden behind quiet humility. The room had become a shared space of understanding, where judgment had no place, only presence and attention. The subtle, intricate music pulled people in, connecting them to emotions they had not anticipated. She had turned an audience of skeptics into witnesses of something profound, something rare. The piano, her hands, and her focus had created a bridge between her inner world and theirs, and it was impossible to look away. Her fingers glided over the keys, creating layers of sound that echoed in the room and in the minds of the listeners. She did not rush, she did not force, and she did not pause unnecessarily. Each note, each chord, each phrase had a purpose, a meaning rooted in her experience. The audience was learning without words, absorbing the story in a way that was visceral, emotional, and unforgettable. The music built slowly, but steadily, reaching moments of intensity that left people holding their breath. It was powerful yet controlled, bold yet delicate. The audience could sense the depth of talent and the years of dedication behind every movement. They were no longer merely watching a performance. They were experiencing the unfolding of a human story, one that had waited for this very moment to be told. She allowed herself a few moments of subtle improvisation, letting her emotions guide her hands while staying true to the structure of the piece. The audience could feel the authenticity, the honesty, and the vulnerability embedded in every note. The room was fully engaged, no longer divided between doubt and curiosity. They were together, part of a shared moment of art and understanding. As the music continued, her control and precision were evident, yet they never overshadowed the emotional depth. She had learned to balance technical mastery with expressive storytelling, and it showed. Every subtle dynamic, every nuanced pause, every gentle accent contributed to a performance that transcended mere playing. The audience could sense the life behind the music, the perseverance and brilliance of a person who had been underestimated for far too long by now. The room had changed completely. The audience, once doubtful and dismissive, was captivated and attentive. They felt the emotion in the music, the story behind the notes, and the dedication that had brought her here. They understood without being told. The message she was conveying, that talent Ida. Music had reached a level of intimacy that she had rarely experienced in front of an audience. She felt it in every fiber of her body. The deep connection between herself and the piano, the space around her, and the people listening. The room had become a vessel for the story she carried. A story that began with doubt and laughter, but was now filled with presence, attention, and emotion. Every note was a conversation. Every chord a reflection of her journey. Her hands moved confidently, yet delicately, exploring the full range of the piano. The lower notes created a grounding resonance that vibrated through the floor, through the chairs, and into the hearts of those sitting. The higher notes floated above, ethereal and light, as if carrying dreams, hopes, and unspoken words. She was no longer simply playing. She was weaving a tapestry of sound that invited the audience into her world. Some in the audience began to lean forward, almost unconsciously, as if drawn by an invisible force. Others closed their eyes, allowing the music to flow into them, to wash over their thoughts, and stir emotions they had forgotten or never realized existed. The laughter from the beginning was now a distant memory, placed by complete attention and an unspoken acknowledgement of the talent unfolding before them. The melody shifted gently, introducing subtle variations that added depth and richness. She allowed herself to feel the music fully, letting emotion guide each movement. Every pause, every rise and fall, every delicate touch of the keys carried intention. The audience could sense it, even if they could not articulate why it affected them so deeply. There was a story being told, one that transcended words. Reaching directly to the heart, her posture was relaxed but poised, a physical manifestation of the focus and control she had cultivated over years of practice. Each finger movement seemed effortless, yet precise, revealing both skill and understanding. She moved through the music with grace, allowing each phrase to breathe, each chord to resonate. The audience began to feel the story embedded in the music, a tale of perseverance, patience, and quiet brilliance waiting to be revealed. The music grew more complex, introducing layers of harmony and counter-melody that required the listener to pay close attention. Some in the audience shifted in their seats, trying to follow the intricacies, while others simply closed their eyes and let the sound envelop them. It was impossible not to be drawn in. The piece carried both technical mastery and emotional resonance, creating a powerful experience that left no one indifferent. Her fingers danced across the keys with a precision that was mesmerizing. Yet there was a softness in the way she played, human touch that reminded the audience that this was not just skill, but expression. The music spoke of struggles overcome, of moments of doubt, of hours spent practicing in silence, and of a determination that refused to be broken. Every note was a testament to her journey, and the audience felt it in their own way. The melody now explored contrasts between intensity and gentleness. Bold, commanding chords were followed by soft, introspective passages that allowed the audience to catch their breath and reflect. She guided them through an emotional landscape, each turn revealing more of her story, more of her depth. The room was captivated, completely immersed, as the music connected everyone present in a shared experience. A few people in the audience wiped tears from their eyes, though most did so quietly. The music had reached a level of emotional truth that left them unable to speak. It was more than a performance. It was a revelation. She was no longer just a young pianist. She had become a storyteller, a messenger of the human experience, capable of evoking emotion without a single word spoken. The piano responded to her touch with clarity and warmth. Every note had weight and purpose. She allowed herself to explore the full emotional range of the piece, moving from soft, delicate passages to powerful, resonant chords that filled the room. The audience could feel every shift, every nuance, every layer of emotion. They were no longer mere spectators. They were participants, experiencing a story unfold in real time. Her breathing was calm. measured in perfect harmony with the music. She felt the room's energy, the collective attention, and the subtle changes in the audience's reactions. They were leaning in, captivated, holding their breath, and experiencing the depth of emotion she conveyed. The laughter that had once greeted her was gone, replaced by awe, respect. In a quiet admiration that spread through the room like a gentle wave, she introduced moments of improvisation, allowing her instincts to guide her hands. These flourishes were not showy, but heartfelt, adding layers of nuance and texture to the music. The audience responded unconsciously, their bodies moving slightly with the rhythm, their expressions softening, their hearts opening. They were no longer judging. They were feeling. They were understanding in a profound, unspoken way. The power and beauty of what she was creating, the melody continued to build, rising and falling, creating tension and release that mirrored the emotions of life itself. She allowed herself to become fully immersed, feeling each note, each chord, each pause. The music was alive, and so was the room. People were drawn in completely, their attention unwavering, their emotions engaged. The connection between performer and audience was palpable, a shared experience that transcended words. Some listeners began to whisper softly, marveling at her skill and the emotional depth of the performance. Others simply sat in silence, unable to articulate the feelings that welled up within them. The music had created a space where judgment had no place, where emotion and understanding were all that mattered. The audience was connected not just to the music, but to the person behind it. The journey that had brought her here. She continued to play with both technical mastery and expressive depth. Each hand moved independently yet harmoniously, creating layers of sound that resonated through the room. The audience could sense the care and intention behind every note. They were witnessing more than just music. They were witnessing the unfolding of a life story, the triumph of dedication, patience, and quiet brilliance. Every chord, every subtle variation, every dynamic shift conveyed her journey and her essence. The piece reached moments of intensity that held the audience captive. They were leaning forward, holding their breath, fully engaged. The music spoke of challenges faced, of persistence, of talent nurtured in silence. She allowed these emotions to guide her hands, creating a performance that was both technically impressive and emotionally moving. The audience could feel the depth of experience behind each note. The story of resilience and genius that had been hidden for so long. Her fingers glided over the keys with precision, control, and grace. The melody carried a sense of hope, of longing, and of triumph. She had taken the audience on a journey from doubt and laughter to attention and awe. The room was fully immersed, the listeners captivated by the depth and authenticity of her expression. They were no longer merely observing. They were part of the story she was telling through music. She allowed herself moments of subtle improvisation, adding flourishes that reflected her personal voice. These touches enhanced the emotional impact, revealing layers of feeling and experience. The audience responded unconsciously, their bodies and minds drawn into the flow of the music. They were connected not just to the performance but to her, to the human being who had overcome doubt and laughter to reveal a rare and undeniable talent. The melody continued to evolve, exploring new textures and emotional nuances. She balanced intensity with delicacy, strength with sensitivity. The room responded, the audience captivated, hanging on every note, every chord, every pause. The music had become a shared language, a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of those listening. They were experiencing not just skill, but truth, emotion, and humanity. As the performance progressed, the room grew quiet, almost reverent. The audience was absorbed, fully present, unable to divert their attention. The laughter that had once greeted her was gone completely, replaced by awe, respect, and a sense of wonder. She had transformed the space, taken control of the narrative, revealed the depth of her talent and the sincerity of her expression. The piano continued to respond to her touch, resonant and alive. She allowed herself to explore every emotional corner, letting the music guide her hands with intuition and feeling. Each note, each chord, each dynamic shift carried intention and meaning. The audience was held in rapt attention, their emotions engaged, their hearts moved. They were experiencing the story she had carried for years, now revealed in sound. The performance reached a point of quiet reflection, where the melody became soft, gentle, and introspective. She allowed these moments to linger, giving the audience space to absorb the emotion and depth of the music. The connection between performer and audience was profound, unspoken, and undeniable. They were no longer observers. They were participants, sharing in the journey she had brought to life. She continued to play with control, expression, and authenticity, allowing the music to flow naturally. The audience remained captivated, moved, and inspired. The room had become a space of emotional engagement, understanding, and appreciation. She had turned doubt into attention, laughter into admiration, and a room full of strangers into witnesses of something rare and extraordinary. The music spoke for her, and the audience listened with open hearts. Forever changed by what they had experienced, the final part of her performance was unlike anything the room had experienced so far. She had carried the audience through a journey of sound, motion, and revelation, and now the music began to build toward its conclusion. Every note was deliberate, every chord resonant, and every pause filled with intention. She was no longer simply playing. She was speaking through her instrument, telling a story that had waited years to be told. The room was silent, not from restraint, but from complete engagement. As every person present felt the power of the moment, her fingers moved swiftly, yet with grace, across the keys. The melody rose and fell like waves, carrying the audience along its path. There were moments of intensity, sharp and commanding, followed by gentle, reflective passages that allowed the room to breathe. The contrast between these dynamics created a sense of movement and life that captivated everyone. People were leaning forward, holding their breath, their eyes fixed on her hands, watching as she transformed the piano into a vessel of emotion. She allowed herself to become fully immersed, feeling the music flowed through her, connecting her to the room and to every person within it. The audience was no longer passive. They were participants, sensing the depth of feeling in every note. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, while others sat in quiet astonishment, unable to look away. The laughter and doubt from the beginning had completely vanished, replaced by awe, respect. In a growing sense of admiration, the melody reached moments of profound beauty. Intricate and delicate, yet powerful in its clarity. Her hands moved independently, each creating layers of sound that intertwined seamlessly. The audience could feel the precision and control behind every note, but also the emotion and humanity that made the performance extraordinary. It was a display of talent and dedication, of years of practice and quiet perseverance, and of a heart that refused to be silenced. A few people were visibly moved, their expressions softening, some blinking rapidly, as if trying to hold back tears. The music carried a sense of triumph, not loud or boastful, but quiet and undeniable. She was telling a story of perseverance and brilliance, one that had gone unnoticed for too long. The audience could feel it in the air, in the resonance of the piano, and in the deliberate care of her movements. They were witnesses to something rare and profound. The rhythm shifted subtly, introducing new patterns and harmonies that challenged the listener's expectations. She played with both technical skill and expressive depth, creating moments that were both exhilarating and contemplative. The room responded, its energy aligned with hers, drawn into the ebb and flow of the music. People were holding their breath, leaning in and fully engaged. They were no longer just observers. They were part of the journey she was guiding them through. Her hands danced across the keys with precision, with grace and confidence. The melody was alive, breathing with emotion, telling a story of resilience, talent, and quiet genius. Each chord carried meaning, each pause held significance. The audience could sense the depth behind every movement. The performance was no longer just about music. It was about human experience, about triumph over doubt and dismissal, about the beauty of hidden brilliance finally revealed. She introduced subtle improvisations, adding personal flourishes that reflected her own voice and feelings. The audience could feel the authenticity, the sincerity, and the courage behind every note. They were captivated, experiencing the story she had carried for so long. The room had transformed from a place of skepticism into a space of deep respect and emotional engagement. Every person present was affected, in their own way, by the story unfolding through sound. The music built to a climax, powerful and resonant, filling every corner of the room. She allowed the intensity to grow, commanding attention without demanding it. The audience was fully immersed, their emotions engaged, their hearts open. Some were holding their breath, some had closed their eyes, and some were leaning forward, unable to resist the pull of the melody. The performance had become a shared experience, a collective journey of discovery, emotion, and admiration. As the final notes approached, she allowed the music to slow, to soften, and to linger. Each chord resonated fully, carrying the weight of everything that had come before. The audience could feel the conclusion approaching, yet they did not rush. They were present, fully attentive, letting the sounds sink in. The music had reached a level of intimacy and connection that few had ever witnessed. A moment where human experience and artistry merged seamlessly. Her hands moved with calm precision. Bringing the melody to its gentle conclusion, the room was silent, not from hesitation, but from awe. The notes faded slowly, echoing in the minds and hearts of everyone present. She did not look up, did not seek validation, and did not smile. She simply allowed the final sounds to settle. Knowing that the story had been told, the message had been delivered, and the audience had been touched in a way that words could not capture. The silence lingered, a shared pause of reflection and recognition. The laughter and doubt that had greeted her at the beginning were gone completely. In their place was a sense of reverence, admiration, and deep appreciation. People began to shift in their seats, some whispering quietly, others nodding in acknowledgement of what they had just witnessed. The transformation of the room was complete. They had seen and felt the quiet genius she had carried within her for so long. Slowly, the first claps began, hesitant at first, then growing steadily until the room was filled with applause. It was not just polite clapping. It was recognition, admiration, and respect for a performance that had transcended mere music. She remained seated for a moment, allowing the audience to express their appreciation, feeling the connection without needing to respond. The room had changed, and so had she, in subtle ways. She had shared her heart, her talent, and her story, and the audience had received it fully. Some people were visibly emotional, others simply stared in quiet amazement. The applause continued, a mix of admiration and gratitude. She finally stood, her posture calm and poised. There was no need for words, no need for gestures. The music had spoken for her, and the room had listened. She walked away from the piano slowly, each step deliberate, carrying with her the quiet satisfaction of having revealed her truth as she left the stage. She felt the weight of the moment settle within her. The journey from doubt and laughter to recognition and awe had been complete. The audience had witnessed something extraordinary, and she had shared something deeply personal and human. The performance was over, but the impact lingered, both for her and for those who had listened. She had transformed a moment, a space, and the hearts of many through the power of music, patience, and quiet genius. People continued to applaud. Some standing, some clapping softly, all affected by the depth of the performance. The room buzzed with admiration, awe, and reflection. She walked away quietly, not seeking praise, not seeking attention, simply carrying with her the knowledge that she had expressed herself fully, authentically, and powerfully. The laughter and doubt were gone forever, replaced by a lasting impression of talent, perseverance, and the undeniable force of a true artist.